Cover crops are used to introduce natural fertilizers to farmland during downtimes. They help prevent erosion during winter months as well as keep valuable microbes alive in the soil. And they even can be used to break up thick clay soil for better growing conditions in the spring.
What we're standing in now is hairy vetch. It's a legume, and we use it as a nitrogen supplement as well as a soil amendment. And we plant green into it. If you were to come out here in late April when I'm planting corn in this field, this vetch will be about waist high, anywhere from thigh to waist high. We are doing a couple different things this year. We took some areas and we're using some blends, which we're using brassicas, radishes, turnips, and rape. Again, it's a soil amendment. The brassicas don't really contribute any nutrients. They will take up and store nutrients, but their tap roots will loosen up the soil.
Dave Black is one of thousands of Virginia row crop farmers who've returned to planting winter cover crops in recent decades. Turns out, it's not a new idea, but for the first half of the 20th century, many growers preferred to clean up their fields for winter so they were ready to plow in the spring instead of planting a cover crop. The practice is so beneficial for the environment that state and federal agencies offer some financial incentives to do so.
And ironically, cover crops have been around for eons. My grandfather used to plant vetch and clover and turn it under. It's called a green manure. It protected the soil back in the day, and they realized it protected the soil and it also enriched the soil with nutrients. The government is very concerned with the environment, and they do help pay a small portion of putting them in to encourage farmers to do that.
We started doing these cover crops about 15 years ago. It was a serious trial and error. Our rotation didn't allow for a ground applied seeding. So we used aerial, and we had some issues, but now we've gotten to where when we fly this vetch on, we're getting an excellent stand. We've had to change some things. I mean, it's like everything with farming, you just never know where something's going to come up. Using vetch on one of the plantations, we discovered that vetch seed is detrimental to horses. So we had to switch to another legume, so we're using a red clover around where the horses are, where that is, just to facilitate not having any problems with the horses. But, who thought?
Cover crops became more functional and useful to farmers beginning in the 1980s, when no-till agricultural practices began to be used in earnest. No-till means the farmer no longer plows his land. Seeds for the next crop are simply drilled into the soil. Sometimes the cover crop is killed off first. Sometimes it is not.
I can get going on cover crops, and it's. I'm a firm believer. I'm a firm believer in no tillage. I'm a firm believer in the technology that we have now. It runs the gamut from the variable rate planting on the planter to variable rates on the fertilizer spreaders. I would love to sit there and tell everybody that, boy, I've saved a boatload of money doing all this, and I haven't. But what I have done is become much more efficient in the use of everything. I get excited over it because it's fun. It really is fun. It's stuff that guys my age talk about. If we could have done this back in the 80s or the 70s, well, 80s, it would have made such a huge difference.
Cover crops do a lot of things. They prevent erosion. They keep something green on the ground, so if there's any excess nitrogen that the previous crop didn't drink up, these cover crops will, it's called a trap crop, it traps it and uses it, keeps it from going into the ground. And some cover crops, some plants like legumes, will actually pull nitrogen out of the air and fix it in their roots so it's available the next season for a corn crop or a soybean crop to utilize. We have NRCS, which is part of USDA. and our local soil and water conservation districts that have programs that fund these, cost share. And so we work hand in hand with them. We work hand in hand with a lot of different agencies, but that's when we work hand in hand with in getting farmers to put in cover crops.
Both the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Virginia Soil and Water Conservation Districts have offered financial benefits to growers to use cover crops and switch to no-till production. The Virginia program began in 1984 when the Agricultural Cost Share Program was established. Sometimes the benefit is a cash payment, sometimes a tax credit. And the state soil and water districts have specialists who work with the farmers to develop a plan to implement these changes for the maximum environmental effect. That's why farm groups like the Virginia Farm Bureau Federation ask the General Assembly each year to provide adequate funding to these programs. Dollar for dollar, they pay big dividends.
The first year was exciting. It has potential to really make some changes on how we do things. It's not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. The cost share that's available through Soil and Water has been a big help, but through the years I've gotten to the point where if it wasn't available, I would still do it. I'm seeing a benefit in the soil structure. I'm seeing a benefit at planting, and obviously I'm seeing a benefit from yields.
In the fiscal year beginning last July 1st, Virginia set aside $47.85 million for local soil and water conservation districts to share with growers using conservation practices, including cover crops and no-till planting. Each district distributes that money based on local needs, and it's not enough to meet environmental goals. Virginia farmers are hoping to get that much funding or even more in the next state budget. In Charles City County, Virginia, I'm Ricky Gibson reporting.